Week 2 and we are still here. Welcome to TCM Howzat, your one-stop shop to talk all things cricket from the past week. Coming up this time round, Week 2 County Championship analysis, Harry Brook IPL madness, Rob Key's first year in charge of England, and of course your questions at the end. Joining us this time round alongside me, Simon Reynolds, are a trio, not a trio because Alex dropped out, a duo of wonderful TCM contributors. They are the man who didn't get sacked last week despite his terrible Wi-Fi, Ben Stevens, and Harrison Burridge has joined us, the smallest club cricketer in the south. Boys, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's dive straight in and start again with the big stories of the week. And once again, dominating the agenda has been the county championship and, of course, Week 2, getting into the swing of things. Strong round last week, 7 matches this week. Harrison, I'll come to you first. What did you make of Week 2?
It was another really gripping, interesting week, albeit one a bit more hampered by rain. Obviously, that one game, Yorkshire, Gloucestershire, not getting any play, which affected a lot of people and annoyed a lot of people. But in terms of what was played, it was very interesting. I think we'll come on to it a bit more, but Surrey very much laid down a marker for the season. In Div 1, Warwickshire showed some impressive signs, and then in Div 2, Durham got a very impressive win themselves.
Definitely, and we are going to jump straight in and start with a focus on arguably the biggest match of the week, which was the Div 1 clash between Surrey and Hampshire at the Oval. Ben, obviously a loss for Hampshire by 9 wickets, but it was a close fought one, I think it's fair to say. What did you make of that game, and what does it say about Hampshire's chances going forward, given they've been beaten by Surrey?
Yeah, I mean, after obviously a big win in the first week for Hampshire, I think, like Harrison said, this is a huge marker laid down for Surrey. You say it was close, but I mean, a 9-wicket win. Back on it come the end of the season, will look, regardless of where the teams finish up, that's a big statement for Surrey. Hampshire, they're really strong. Abbas got 6 again. There were, I think, Gubbins made runs. They've got solid players. I think this just probably shows more about Surrey rather than Hampshire. I would say it's at the Kia Oval. They're comfortable there. Pope averages about 8 million at the Oval. I think it's actually 91 he averages. But like the guy, I think it just shows you more Surrey's level as opposed to Hampshire being, particularly weak in any area. I mean, when you've got the quality of Pope just being able to do that, and he will likely do that week in, week out throughout this season, it's crazy. And someone like Tom Law's coming through 4 for 58 in the first innings, 2 for 74 in the second. It's pretty intimidating, that Surrey side. And Folkes wasn't even playing.
Definitely the batting, a big area for Surrey that was a standout. Ollie Pope, 122 from 102, playing some outrageous shots in true Bazball style. Harrison, how do you rate him and Surrey's performance more broadly? Dom Sibley contribution as well, 79, not out in an anchor role. He looked in some form. What do you think about this Surrey batting order? Because they just look formidable and almost unstoppable.
I think it's fair to say they will probably be unstoppable over the course of the season on these early showings. Adding Dom Sibley into a mix from what was a strong batting lineup last season is in many ways taking the mick in some ways. They've just got quality in every position. You could arguably say most of the way through the batting lineup is international quality, and a lot of them have played for England, especially Ollie Pope. I mean, that second innings, yes, they just completely did take the mick. He played with such ease. It was mostly error-free. Admittedly, I turned off when he was on around 70 or 80 because I just had enough as a Hampshire fan.
Fake fan.
But just the way he after tea properly kicked on and took the attack to the Hampshire bowlers, because there was still a little bit of hope at tea that Hampshire could maybe squeeze a draw out of it. But the way he and Sibley as well, fair play to him, accelerated, was full credit to them. But the way Surrey bowled as well throughout, Ben mentioned Tom Laws, for him to come in for his first game of the season, he only played a handful last season and played such a pivotal role. He took out, I believe it was Liam Dawson on the first day early on with an absolute seed, to be fair to him. And then you had Sean Abbott, Kemar Roach, and Dan Moyle as well. I mean, that's an international quality attack in itself. They're just internationals everywhere with them.
Definitely. And I wanted to get your thoughts maybe on Hampshire, obviously, as our resident Hampshire fan here today. Do you think this is going to hamper their chances, make them take a step back, look at things? Or do you think they'll just say, at the end of the day, we were up against a formidable, amazing Surrey side? And also a word on Mohamed Abbas as well, because he is just unreal, I think it's fair to say. What do you think about Hampshire more generally after this crushing defeat?
I'll start just with Abbas. I think he is very much a cheat code for county cricket. He's just reliably accurate, line and length, ball after ball, get movement off the seam and through the air. And batters in county cricket for years have just not figured out how to play him or not get out to him in that way. And to have 2 sixers in the 2 opening rounds is fantastic. But on a more, I guess, general point for Hampshire, a loss at the Oval is nothing to be ashamed of, and it normally does happen for Hampshire in any season. Happened at the same time last year for them in their campaign. But the worries with the batting at the top of the order again keep showing through. It wasn't properly addressed over the winter. They brought in Fletcher Middleton from the academy, and fair play to him. He's probably been the most consistent of them, and his 2 dismissals against Surrey were from top class balls that you can't really argue about. But then Gubbins himself got run second innings, but there's a larger issue. The batting is still missed fine, and bowling is always going to be exceptional. There's a little worry over Keith Barker. He hasn't quite fired with the ball, and he does reportedly have a broken hand too. So he might not play in the next couple of weeks, which will have to leave him trying to go to a bit more depth, and whether you go Brad Wheel or someone like Scott Curry remains to be seen.
Definitely, and it always puts a smile on my face to see a Hampshire loss. Not that they live rent free in my head or anything. Anyway, let's stick with Division 1 and go to Edgbaston, where Warwickshire got their first win of the campaign against Kent. Brutal batting performance in the first innings, with Sam Hain making 165 not out. I think it's fair to say they put Kent up against it from the very start, but they followed it through with the bowling. The Chris duo, Rushworth and Woke Starring, taking 11 wickets across 2 innings, and it did get close in Kent's defence. But was this a statement of intent from Warwickshire, Ben? Do you think they are going to be challenging for that title?
I mean, I would say absolutely. It looks, obviously again, early season, bowling conditions being favourable always kind of may slant stats slightly for bowlers who may then end up not having as good a season as it may seem from the first couple of games. But I think what really impressed me was the fact that, talk about the 2 Chris's, but all the bowlers shared the wickets. So you had Hassan Ali getting 5 for the match, you had Oliver Hannon-Dolby getting 4, Chris Rushworth getting 5, and Chris Wokes getting 5. So you've got literally your entire seam attack there in form. And I think last week as well, I don't have the numbers to hand, but I think it was a similar vein. If you've got a bowling attack that are that deep, with the sort of quality that, someone like Sam Hain, he's been around, he's sort of like been on one of those many players who's sort of just on the fringe of that England radar for so long. And you actually look at, like, I think he's only 28 years old, and he's got a really impressive first class average, a lot of hundreds. So I mean, it will probably just benefit them if he stays off England's radar and just keeps making runs all season. But they look a really well balanced side. They got youth in Dan Mousley as well. Rob Yates, of course, I think is only 23, scored 100 at the top of the order. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that win, I think, for a side.
Definitely, and it did go down to the wire. So I think it's worth a mention to Kent because they weren't all bad. Joey Everson, 99, tantalising for him. Ben Compton again fought valiantly late on day 4. Ultimately, they couldn't push that draw over the line. How concerned should Kent fans be with that loss? Obviously a bit of a shaky time there at Edgbaston. Harrison, do you think they'll be mulling on that much, or do you think it'll just be onwards and upwards?
I think it will definitely stay on their minds for a while. It's had a bit of an ominous feel to it in some way, especially with the bowling department. They struggled with that all of last summer. I mean, fair play to them. They've gone out and signed Wes Agar last week, and here I believe he comes in from this week's Australian seamer to boost that bowling attack, but that's been their problem for years. The bowling attack hasn't consistently fired and taken those 20 wickets. But then it's the batting. They just capitulated, to be fair, in both innings. To be able to lose a whole day 2 to play and still go down by an innings is never a good sign for a team. And I mean, fair play to Ben Compton, who's always reliable and for runs and staying at the crease for a period of time for Kent in recent times, and Joey Everson as well, digging in with the low order along with Conor McCurr. They saved a bit of face for Kent, because that really could have just been over by 2-3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and been a proper embarrassing defeat.
I think it's quite annoying for Kent fans, given that on paper they don't have a terrible side, and yet they're still not quite firing. But I think the signs are there that maybe some things are to come. Let's move to Division 2 then. And there were only 2 matches there this week. Obviously, Gloucestershire, Yorkshire postponed. We're going to get onto that a little bit later. But the standout in that one in Division 2 was Durham's late win over Worcestershire. Matt Kuhnman taked a 5 in a thriller. If Rob were here, I think he'd tell us how significant this win is for Durham. But do you think he'd be right in that, Ben? Is this really significant, or is there a risk of getting slightly maybe too ahead of themselves?
I think what was really significant about it, stood out to me in terms of the pattern of how this season may go, is the second innings. The run rate for all 3 innings in the match was somewhere around sort of the high 2.9s, and then between 3 and 3.5. Durham were able to go out there in that second innings and score at 6 runs and over, getting to about 240, 250, I think it was. Beddingham and Borthwick put on 196, I think. Beddingham 118 in the first, 86 in the second. You know, their middle order looks really strong. Durham. Beddingham's first class average is fantastic, and it's a bit of a wonder to me why he's never been selected for South Africa, given their sort of middle order struggles in Test cricket in the last few years. And I mean, for Kuhneman, for an Australian spinner to be taking as many wickets as he has on pitches that, you know, who'd want to be a spinner like early doors in England, you know, for him to go and do what he's done, obviously get those 5 wickets in the second innings, it's pretty exciting for Durham, I got to say. Yeah.
Definitely. And Harrison, do you think this is a Bazball approach, the Bazball effect? I know Durham's coach has said a bit about playing with more of an aggressive intent. Do you think counties are trying to replicate what they're seeing at the international level?
I think there's always going to be an element, especially at Durham. Ben Stokes still involved there, albeit he doesn't play a lot. Matt Potts, I think it was, before the season, spoke in an interview about how they are going to try and emulate England in a way, and I think that was very evident, as Ben pointed out, in that second innings. But I think it's also important to point out Worcestershire's hand in this. In their first innings on day 3, they declared only 5 down while still behind by a small total, and they tried to force a win from there as well, which could be the effect of the draw only going down to 5 points. That could be a pattern we see of the season, teams not settling for draw and rather losing than just shaking hands at some point on day 4. But they more than played their part, but they'll be kicking themselves for how they batted on day 4. They showed a lot of grit and determination in their first innings, and then apart from a small partnership between Jack Haynes and one other player, I can't quite remember right now, but away from that, and then the number 10s and 11 dug in for a period of time, but they were rather blown away by Matt Kuhneman and co for Durham.
And Worcestershire, as we know, had struggles last season, so it'll be interesting to see whether they can bounce back from that defeat. We've got to mention Somerset. I was going to rinse Alex, but he decided not to turn up, so it'll have to wait. But let's talk a bit about Notts, their opposition, because Stuart Broad was back out there this week, but Brett Hutton, who came in at the last minute, took 9 wickets in the match there. I mean, I don't know about you, but I hadn't really heard of him. Ben, what a player, really! What a performance from him.
Again, I'm similar to you. Didn't have too much knowledge of the guy before this weekend, really. And I think I saw him sort of come out on Twitter afterwards, and obviously, as you would any professional cricketer, to come out and say how strong their bowling lineup is, etc., etc. But I mean, yeah, what a way to announce yourself to the season. His action looks really quite exciting from what I've seen. I was quite taken aback by sort of his arm seems to come out at quite a wide angle and then come back in, which it's just always nice to sort of see. Just not your average traditional seamer in the county championship. Yeah, I think I don't think Notts look too exciting as a side really. There's not too many names that are standing out to me in that lineup. But Hamid and Duckett both making 50s is good for them. I've always been a big fan of Haseeb Hamid ever since he broke into that England side. So to see that man doing well, I can only wish the best for him.
I think I can echo that as a former Lancashire player. It's nice to see Lancashire producing such talent, really, isn't it?
I think he took about 28 balls to get off the mark, though, I think, in the first innings, which classic Haseeb, isn't it?
Yeah. But we love to see it. We do. In terms of Somerset, though, bit of a disappointment, I think it's fair to say. Are they going to be worried down in Taunton? Or Ben's shaking his head at that. Am I being too harsh, Harrison?
No, I'm agreeing with you.
I don't think you're being too harsh. I talked a moment ago about Kent and the way they capitulated in ominous feelings. Somerset managed to capitulate even more in their own ways with the bat in hand. Josh Davies saved them first innings with a 50 and kind of just kept them in the game in the hunt going to day 4, but then they were just blown away again. I mean, Notts bowling attack I spoke elsewhere before the season about how there's so many quality bowling attacks throughout each team in Div 1. Notts is a perfect example of that. The fact Brett Hutton could come in and do what he did, and he's not even a regular. Same with Stuart Broad, he's not a regular for them as well, and he's still not to his usual levels, but picked up a couple of key wickets as well. They have, as Ben mentioned, a couple of batters that will probably keep them afloat this year, but for Somerset, there's a bit of an ominous feel. Bancroft hasn't really fired yet. Neither has Dixon or Tonko the Cadmore, their new signings. It looks a bit of a mess down in Taunton, and one they're going to need to try and fix quickly.
And one which fills me with joy. Finally, then
you just hate every other county in England, don't you?
Basically, yeah, to be honest. Has it taken you 2 weeks to notice that? Finally, then, what have we missed? Well, Lancashire again, another draw, sadly for us, and I think that was should have been a win really for us. But George Bell, the star of the show, there looks in some form. I'm dead chuffed for him because I followed him since the Under-19s World Cup. He's an absolute gun and made 60 and 56, so I wanted to mention that. But again, I think Lancashire really probably should have won there and will be disappointed with the draw. Northants got their first win of the season against Middlesex, who look to be really struggling in Division 1. Rob Keogh and Sam Whiteman, decent shifts with the bat to put their team in the winning position. And in the other Div 2 match, Leicestershire drew against Derbyshire. Leicestershire had a great time with the bat. Lewis Hill made 162, whilst their captain Ackerman also made 114. But Derbyshire managed to even them out. Wayne Madsen dominating, making 75. So we'll come back to the county championship with our picks of the week a little bit later on. But let's move on to our next topic, because something that's been dominating the Twitter debate certainly over the past few days is pitches. And of course, we saw Gloucestershire Yorkshire abandoned without a bowl. Oh, that's a tongue twister. Anyway, without not played anyway, but last week Somerset's opening game was heavily hampered. Harrison, what's your thoughts on these county pitches? Is there anything we can do about it? And do you think it's just the nature of playing county championship cricket in April?
There's always going to be questions about can you do more, and I think maybe there could be a little bit more funding to give them similar drainage to see at some test match grounds. But then again, as someone who's kind of in the area sort of Gloucestershire and Somerset, there's been so much rain for the past month or so. Just like the water table is ridiculously high. Any rain just pushes it over the top. And for the ground staff to even get some play at Somerset last week, and then to even try and get some game played at Gloucestershire this week, is fair play to them. But the amount of rain and the deluges it's come down in has been impossible for ground staff to get games on. And ultimately, sometimes you just can't beat the conditions.
To play devil's advocate then, I would say to that the richer counties, say Surrey, Lancashire, your likes of them, they are able to install good pitch draining systems. And it was dry, I think, for some of the days in Gloucestershire versus Yorkshire. Is it not a disappointment that these games can't get on? Should the ECB be doing more, Ben, to make sure that these grounds that don't have as much money have better draining systems?
I think there's got to be some accountability from the ECB. Certainly, I think one thing you can't do, which I did see saw a few people on Twitter as I was reading some threads on it, sort of seeming to direct criticism at Gloucestershire for it, and it's a difficult one because by all accounts it had been coming for like 2 weeks. People knew the weather patterns and they knew that no matter how hard Gloucester's ground staff were going to work, that they weren't going to be able to get on and probably wouldn't get any play. They knew that from the Monday, from the Tuesday of the event. But for Gloucestershire, a club that have lost money in the last couple of years and don't have the money to just throw at things, there's got to be some support there. And I'm not an expert on ground mechanics and weather and how to deal with that in grass and things like that, but there's got to be some ways of helping it out. From a simple perspective, the season a little bit later, give it time to, give the weather time to turn around, and just don't even bring in the possibility of having these rainy weeks where you're not getting any play at all. Because if you're trying to sell the county championship, which we know that Red Bull cricket is on a slightly downwards trajectory at the minute, if you're trying to sell that as a product, you can't be having whole fan bases just be completely written off and getting games. I mean, Gloucester have had 3 days of cricket out of a possible 8 so far in this season, and it's not fair on them. So I don't think it's selling the product particularly well, and there's got to be conversations had about it.
I think I just finally, to just wrap this part up, I would say that I just couldn't see if this game and the rain had happened at, say, Lancashire or Yorkshire or Headingley or Old Trafford, or even the Oval or Lords, one of those test grounds. I can't see that game being abandoned. I think that the ground staff and the drainage systems would have allowed for some play to go on. I think you make a valid point there that there is a need to address this from the ECB, because it's not fair on the smaller counties who are up against it as it is. So I would say definite discussion needed there. Now, from pitches to someone who doesn't care about the pitch and can just whack it all over the park, because making the headlines this week was Harry Brook in the IPL, and I think it was worth talking about because he hit his maiden IPL century, 100 not out off 155 balls. Simple question to you: how good is he, Harrison?
Very good.
Right, that's it.
He took a bit of time to settle into the IPL, but then that innings is just full of quality. They spoke up before about how he struggled against spin, but he used that to his advantage in a way. He completely tore the paces apart and just worked around the spinners and let his mate down the other and do the job. And I think something that may have flown it away is the fact he's done this opening. For Yorkshire Northern Superchargers in the 100, he will be batting in the middle order, 3, 4, 5, wherever that may be. But for Sunrise, it's been knocked up to open, and I mean that's an innings full of maturity and quality. And for someone so young and still so inexperienced in the grand scheme of things for the top level of cricket, that was a fantastic knock.
And Ben, how nice is it to see him silence the haters just quickly?
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, there was already, as cricket fans love to do, there was already doubts creeping in India and people saying, oh, what did they pay all the money for? And it was just an innings of such authority and such kind of, just to see him, like, he hit his first ball for 4. You just saw straight after that, it was like you knew he was going to make runs. And I think the point Harrison makes about him doing it from the top, I actually think that's really smart coaching from Sunrisers, because they've clearly identified that spin is, a weakness would be a massive overstatement, but not his strength. So what do? You put him up top where he's going to face his first 15, 20 balls from paces. And that's exactly what he did. You know, I genuinely don't think I've been as excited about an England prospect potentially since Joe Root. You know, Josh Butler obviously has been fantastic, but in terms of just someone being so easy on the eye, I mean, there was that thick over long off, and it's sort of just become his trademark, hasn't it? The high elbows and the high, the high hands, and his ball striking and how still his head stays is just incredible. And then obviously the interview at the end saying that he literally came out and said it's nice to shut up some of the Indian fans. So, you know, it's really satisfying. I love that confidence for him, because that's what you need when you're in those environments.
Definitely. And apart from the fact he's from Yorkshire, which pains me, it's great to see, really, isn't it? But he is part of a broader white ball side, which brings us nicely onto projects more generally, because as we record this today, Rob Key has been in position as Managing Director of English Cricket for 1 year. Obviously, 365 days, a long time, Harrison. He's managed to steady the ship, hasn't he? He's got to be commended. They've been doing quite well.
Absolutely. I think for all the uproar that was about when he was appointed, about there were claims of job for boys, and another mate from Sky Sports has just been appointed. He's shut down a lot of those critics, employed Brendan McCullum, made Ben Stokes captain, made the Test team one of the most exciting to watch in the world, and arguably one of the best in the world at the same time. He'd gone on and won a T20 World Cup, and yes, the 50 over stuff hasn't been as successful so far, but then again, there's a World Cup coming up at the end of this season. It could be another trophy there, but he's come in, he's as you say, he's really steadied the ship, and he's arguably pushed the ship on further. That England's in a much better position now than they were 12 months ago, especially in Test cricket, because imagine going into this Ashes series with that Test squad 12 months ago, it would be a bit of a scary prospect for what it could happen to England. But whereas now we're going with genuine excitement and wondering what could happen in those games against Australia.
And he's definitely kept the momentum and built momentum going forward. And I think it's really interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It was, I think if we think back 12 months, it was the job nobody wanted. It was the job, who wants to get in charge of English cricket at this time? And he was appointed, and everyone was up in uproar, as you say, jobs for the boys, etc., etc. And he's just proved that all wrong. And I think it shows a lot for what having a cricket brain in that position rather than a managing brain can do. So it'll be definitely interesting to see how he progresses and how that momentum keeps going. I'd love to talk more about Rob Key, but we're going to move on to our Of the Weeks. It's the part of the show where we like to talk about our Players of the Week and our Thanks for Coming of the Week. So that's one person who you think's done really well and one person who's had a bit of a bad week. Ben, let's come to you first for your Player of the Week and then your Thanks for Coming of the Week.
I'm going to go Player of the Week, Ollie Pope, at home, averaging 90 plus at the Kia Oval, 91 in the first innings to set your side up, and then go out and casually tap everyone around for 122 at more than 100 strike rate. If he can just keep on warming up for that Ashes. I mean, there's been talk of him potentially even being vice. He's next in line, sort of as one of the leaders in the group for the England squad. His confidence is going from strength to strength, and his county championship form is just insanely consistent. And then Thanks for Coming. I love him, and he's genuinely one of my favourite batsmen of all time and one of my heroes. But Alistair Cook, for being dismissed twice by his old mate Jimmy Anderson. Sorry, Alistair, I love you, mate, but
well,
Jimmy's giving you a big thanks for coming.
I'm sure he's watching, Ben, so I'm sure you can never be friends anymore.
I'm sure he will be.
To you. Who's your Player of the Week and who's your Thanks for Coming of the Week?
I'm going to go for Brett Hutton, the Player of the Week. I think we talked about him already, but to come in and drop a performance like that against Somerset, win your county the game in Nottinghamshire, and give them that first win of the season, a dominant win as well, with such ease, I think deserves a lot of credit, and he was a large part of that. Thanks for coming. We can go a bit different, and Yorkshire and Gloucestershire can have it together. No game played for them. Abandoned. Hard luck sometimes, but yeah, they can have it this week.
Fantastic. That moves us on to our final section, which is Ask TCM. Now, people have been sending in questions, most of them just rinsing me because I made a typo, but we're going to gloss over that and pretend that didn't happen. And we're going to go to a serious one first, which is one I missed and has come in from Ben's dad. He politely told at the start of recording, and it's about James. And he says, with Basel being applied across all formats of England's sides, would now be a good opportunity to get James Vince back into the Test team, knowing he could go and play with freedom and without fear of being criticised for nicking off. Might we see his true potential? I'm going to let Harrison answer your dad's question, Ben. Harrison, what do you make of that?
It's an interesting viewpoint. It's one that's been bounced around a few times since Brendan McCullum came in and this philosophy started to take shape. But for me, no, I think that ship has sailed from Test cricket. He has really struggled in red ball the first couple of games this season, and back end of last summer he kind of did look a bit lost at times against the red ball, but still has it in the white ball cricket. Obviously top run score on the blast last season and still has England honours to come maybe in the future. But I think for Test cricket there's others plenty more ahead of him now, and let him do what he does for Hampshire and hopefully lead them to a county championship.
And just time for one more, and this comes from WG Rumblebants on Twitter, and he says, how many runs does a county opener have to score before the start of the Ashes to stand a chance of replacing Crawley, and who is most likely to score them? Ooh. Ben, quickly please.
That's a great question. Okay, so I think first of all it depends a lot on Crawley's form. I think Crawley will have to be played pretty badly for McCullum and for Stokes to decide that he's not going to be in that side, especially given Stokes' comments regarding the fact that he knows what his side's going to be already. So based on that, you're going to have to look at Keaton Jennings and someone of that sort of ilk going out and scoring 700, 800 runs by the time the Ashes starts. You're going to have to go out and, they're going to have to be scoring not just hundreds, but big hundreds in all sorts of conditions. Yeah, I mean, Ben Compton is very, very solid, but you're probably not going to be looking at anyone from Division 2, I would say. Yeah, I don't personally see it happening. But if it does, it's going to have to be someone scoring close to 1,000 runs by the time the Ashes gets there, I think.
I'm gonna throw one out here and say that if Crawley doesn't do well in the first two tests, he will be dropped, and it will be Ben Compton who replaces him. And that's my early prediction right there. And I think it's a nice, talking a bit about the Ashes is a nice way to end it, because the Ashes is coming up, and of course we will be talking about that.
2 months. 2 months.
Yeah, but that feels like close now because the sun's out and it feels like summer, so get me to a pub garden. Right, thank you very much indeed, Ben and Harrison, for joining us on this week's edition of Howzat. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, and whilst you're there on the channel, please do check out our women's regional previews, which are hosted by Harrison. They are coming out daily now, I believe, so have a look out for them. Until the next time though, I've enjoyed that, and it was less shambolic than last week, so we've made progress. Boys, thank you very much indeed, and we will see you in the next one.